Back. Today I'll be covering the next module for A2 level, which is Psychology and Organizations, or as I usually call it, Organizational Psychology, right? Now, I only cover two modules in your A2 chapters, which are, in your A2 syllabus, which are Abnormal Psychology and Organizational Psychology. I don't cover the other two chapters on Consumer Behavior and Health. If you want to, you can read that from the textbook itself. Now, let's move on. So, we're looking at motivation to work, right? We want to understand what motivates people to work, right? There has to be a reason behind it, because otherwise, you wouldn't just do work for free or for fun, right? Unless there's some kind of a motivator for you. So, moving on. See? Okay, so before that, I usually ask my students, what do you understand from the term organizational psychology, right? What does it mean to you? What things come to mind when you think about this term, organizational psychology? Okay, think about it for a moment. Think about it in your head. What kind of things do you understand from this, right? And if you can link this new topic to your AS knowledge, right? Memory is often improved when you take something new and you try to link it to things that you already know. And if you can do that, you're able to learn a lot better, right? You're able to remember more stuff because you're already linking new things to the old things which you already know. So if you think about your AS psychology, what are the chapters that we had? Things to do with cognitive, social, right? So if you think about it from a cognitive perspective, what is organizational psychology? Perhaps, understanding how people think about their work. What about a social perspective? Organizational psychology may perhaps include how people interact with each other, right? And how you have small social circles in an office, right? And so on and so forth, right? So try and link it. For my chapters on A2, what I suggested to my students to try doing was this. Before you learn the lecture material, read some past year questions, right? Go look for the papers online, they can be easily found. Keep some of those questions in mind, and then as you're learning from this video, try to answer those questions along the way. So for example, this was a past year question paper in 2018. Two questions there. Firstly, describe what psychologists have discovered about motivators at work, intrinsic, extrinsic rewards, right? And the second one is evaluate what psychologists have discovered about motivators at work, including a discussion on reductionism. Now, you may not understand the question completely, and that's fine, but keep these keywords in mind. So firstly, motivators at work, intrinsic, extrinsic rewards, right? So keep those words in mind as we go through the lecture. Maybe you might pick up some interesting points and it might help you answer, right? So when you see the word describe, the key points that are required is to give details and explain the main features of. When you see the word evaluate, you want to discuss the importance of, judge the overall worth of, and make an attempt to weigh up your opinions. Okay, I discuss this more in class with my students, but essentially in your A-level syllabus, this is what's required. All the questions there will have a keyword, right, usually at the beginning, that will sort of indicate what that question expects from you, right? Is it just to describe the details of a study, or to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a study, right? So the keyword tells you what the question is looking for. Okay. Now, there are 5 chapters in organizational psychology, which is motivation to work, leadership and management, group behavior and organizations, organizational work conditions, satisfaction at work, right? So all these 5 chapters will be covered briefly in my videos. But once again, a reminder, you can't just rely on my videos to get by in your exams. You really, really, really need to go and read more on your own. You can go to other resources online, find psychology resources which are good, or you can just read the studies themselves to get a better understanding. Okay? Now, there are 3 subdivisions in the chapter of motivation to work. The first one is need theories, cognitive theories, and finally motivators at work. Need theories involve the hierarchy of needs by Maslow, Erg Theory by Adolpher, achievement motivation by McClelland, right? So keep that in mind. Sometimes I notice when my students feel overwhelmed with information, I tell them to break it down into little chunks. So rather than look at all at one go, just break it down to one chunk, 3 pieces, another chunk, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, another chunk, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, right? So the smaller you break it down, the easier it becomes to remember, right? Under cognitive, you've got the goal setting theory, the VIE, expectancy theory, and as well as the equity theory, right? Finally, motivators include intrinsic, extrinsic, types of rewards, non-monetary rewards, and so on and so forth, right? So if you look at it right now, all at once, it seems overwhelming, right? But if you break it down, piece by piece by piece, it's a lot easier to study that way, right? So let's go to our first theory, right? So we're going to be talking about something called the need theories, right? The need theories, we're going to be covering three: Maslow's, Aldelfer, and McClellan. Please keep them in mind when you're answering essays. It's always good to include these names. Cognitive is the goal setting. Expectancy, equity, motivators include intrinsic, extrinsic rewards. Okay, so firstly, need theories. This is a very famous picture. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? At the bottom, we start at the bottom and we work our way to the top. So at the bottom, physiological needs, biological needs, right? Air, water, food, shelter. These are the things our bodies need to survive. Next comes safety, personal security, employment, resources, health, property, and so on, to feel safe in your environment. Next is love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, right? Relationships. Next comes esteem, right? How you feel about yourself, your respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. And last but not the least, self-actualization, a desire to become the most that one can be, right? So self-actualization is, in Maslow's opinion, is the highest level of achievement that a human can get, right? It goes upwards from the bottom to the top, okay? He came up with this in 1943. From your basic needs, you move on to your higher needs. And you need to fulfill your basic needs in order to move to the next level, right? So it's called a hierarchy because you have to fulfill at the bottom and then go to the next one on top, and then on top, and then on top, right? Now, ask yourself, can everybody fulfill all? Do any of you listening, do you feel like you fulfilled all of these needs 100%? Or all of you self-actualized? Even I don't feel self-actualized, right? Sometimes my needs are not being met, right? So, in fact, there's an old and a new one. There's an old one. What we're looking at right now is the old one, and there's actually a new hierarchy with added levels, which we'll look at here, right? So you can look at this one. The newer one, biological, that's the same. Safety, that's the same. Belongingness and love, that's the same. Esteem has moved down, right? And then followed by cognitive, that's new. Aesthetic needs, the need for beauty, balance, form, right? That's new. Self-actualization is there. Personal growth, self-fulfillment, and lastly, transcendence, helping others to self-actualize. It sounds like a very Buddhist philosophy kind of thing, right? Once you've reached enlightenment, then you help others find enlightenment, right? So this is the new one. Generally speaking, however, I notice people often refer to the old one more often than the new one, right? In fact, I didn't even know that the new one existed until I was teaching A-level psychology, and I was like, oh, there's a new one? I didn't even know, because most of us just refer to the old one since some of the levels pretty much overlap with each other, right, in some ways, right? So who do you think is transcendent? Can you think of any human being that fulfills all their needs and has reached that level of transcendence? Well, here are some examples. These are three very admirable people, right? On the left here, this lady in the nun's habit, her name is Mother Teresa, right, who dedicated her life to serving God and to helping others, right? So I feel that's one of the characteristics of transcendence, right, is that you transcend, you rise above all these, like, worldly problems and pleasures and stuff like that, and you not only do you reach the fullest of your potential, but you use that potential to help others. So Mother Teresa, very helpful to other people. Nelson Mandela was put in prison, right, and when he came out, he didn't hate people, and say he forgave them, he helped them, right, with human rights movements. Mahatma Gandhi, another wonderful example, right, of human rights activism, right, for freeing the whole of India. After he had achieved that understanding that you don't need violence in order to gain independence, and then he helped other people see that as well, right? So that in my opinion would be examples of human beings who have reached levels of transcendence. Okay, now let's look at need theories number 2. So this is the ERG theory of motivation by Aldelfer. Okay, so he looked at Maslow's theory. He said, let's revise it, let's simplify it. So he classified it into 3 areas. Can you see ERG, right? So he took, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, so 5, instead of 5 different levels for Maslow, he decided, why don't we just, so there's 5 levels, let's just call it ERG. I forgot I can draw on my slides, so it's a lot easier that way. So that's why it's called the ERG theory, right? Existence, relatedness, and growth. So existence, relatedness, and growth. So existence is all about your basic needs, right? Physiological needs, safety needs. I need to have food, water, shelter. I need to feel safe, and so on and so forth, right? What about, what else is there? Social needs, right? Self-esteem, relationships with others, and so on and so forth, okay? Lastly is your growth needs, which covers a bit of self-esteem as well, as finally the self-actualization, all right? Okay, so is this hierarchical? Right? Not as hierarchical as Maslow's, right? So in Maslow's theory, right, if you remember earlier, you have to fulfill the bottom needs in order to move to the top. Whereas Adelpha is not so much on that. His is more towards an age-related focus. At different ages in life, you focus on different things, right? In your beginning years of life, everybody just focuses on safety and physiological needs, right? Babies are not thinking about self-actualization when they're just born, right? They just want to survive. And then later, as you grow up, you learn to develop relationships and understand yourself better. And then later in life, perhaps when you're close to retirement, you might perhaps reach a level of self-actualization and you grow more, right? So not necessarily hierarchical, more towards age-related, right? Okay, so he also believed that people could go back and forth between the levels, right? So your existence needs, if they're met, you feel satisfied, you can progress to relatedness needs. If these are not met, you might regress and you get frustrated, you go back to existence needs. If your related needs are met, then you go forward satisfied. Your related needs, you go to growth, you grow more, right? If your growth needs are not met, you regress back to relatedness. So there's a lot more dynamic movement compared to Maslow's, right? What ideal job can provide for all your needs? Any of you? Can you think of an ideal job that you have or that you would want to have that can provide for all your needs? Right, at the basic level, we usually just need a job that provides for our salary, and then with our money, we can pay for all our other needs, right? Let's look at another theory of needs, right? McClelland's theory of achievement, right? There are three: en-ach, en-af, and en-pow, right? It sounds like a foreign language, but it's simply referring to the three needs, which is the need for achievement, en-ach, en-af is the need for affiliation, or an en-af, right? Rather, and en-pow, which is the need for power. Achievement, affiliation, power. Which one do you think you need more of? Do you need to achieve stuff? Do you need to, have good relationships with others? Do you need to have power and control? So let's look at this theory. Okay, which AS study could McClelland's theory be applied to? I ask this to my students sometimes. What do you think? Which theory? Right? Need for achievement, need for power. Right? You remember Milgram's experiment? There was a lot of power difference, right, between the experimenter as well as the participants, right? There could be a need for power there. I need to, enforce my authority over my participants by making them follow my needs, right? Okay. Let's see what needs you have. Okay, that's something I give my students to try out. You can find some online surveys to find out which one of these three needs you have the most of, right? So McClelland believed that these internal motives are unconscious, right? We're not consciously aware of these needs, right? We need to understand ourselves more because we have them, but we're not aware about them, right, on a day-to-day basis, right? So he believed that you could only measure this via a thematic apperception test, or a TAT test, right? Because you're unconscious, you can't just ask, oh, so what's your need? Do you need power? Do you need affiliation? Or do you need achievement? People can't really answer properly that way. You need to do something called a TAT test, right? And we'll see what an example of that looks like. It's called a type of projective test. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so projective test is like this, right? You give someone a picture and you ask them to tell a story, what they understand from the picture. So here, look at the picture. Your task is to write a complete story about the picture you see above. This should be an imaginative story with a beginning, middle, and an end. Try to portray who the people might be, what they are feeling, thinking, and wishing. Right? Try to tell what led to the situation depicted in the picture and how everything will turn out in the end. Okay, so just take a few seconds, look at the picture. What do you think is going on? Come up with a story to describe this picture. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, so what do you guys come up with, right? Whatever you're thinking about, let's discuss it. Now, TAT was originally designed to determine the degree to which people wrote about themes relating to achievement, affiliation, power. Although there are a series of different TAT pictures, the one that was used in this study was somewhat related to each of these themes. Although most of the respondents made up the story with achievement themes, such as the story focused on scientific discovery, reflecting the writer's interests, achievement, success, others focus on the nature of friendship between the two women, interest and affiliation, yet others focus on the status difference, reflecting the writer's concerns with status and power. Right? Respondents with a very high need for achievement are those who love the challenge of work. They're motivated by a desire to get ahead in the job, solve problems, and to be outstanding work performers. Individuals with high need for achievement is also associated with being task-oriented, preferring situations offering moderate level risk and difficulty, desiring feedback about goal attainment. Right. So when you were looking at the picture of the two ladies who looked like they were doing some scientific experiment, if you had thought about a story that involved them perhaps discovering a brand new scientific breakthrough of some sort. So that has to do with achievement, right? Something to do with achieving something, overcoming challenges, and so on and so forth. If you wrote that, then you have a high need for achievement, and this description is related to you. But what if you wrote something else? What about the nature of friendship between the two women? Maybe you talked about their relationship, how they're helping each other, and so on. They greatly concern interpersonal relationship on the job, preferring working with others on a task. They're motivated by being cooperative rather than competitive. Lastly, a need for power, right? Status orientation, right? People are more motivated to gain influence and prestige than to solve particular problems personally or reach performance goals. Individuals with a high need for power tend to occupy supervisory or managerial positions, right? So if you talked about how the women have a differentiation, a difference in levels of power, like one woman was the teacher and the other one was a student, maybe it was an exam and she's being graded, then that would be a need for power, right? Okay, so let's do some brief evaluation. Criticisms of Maslow's theory are, first of all, that it's a strict hierarchy. He believed that you need to fulfill the lower hierarchies before you can go up to the higher levels, which, as we know from real experience, is probably not true, right? In addition to that, what's the operational definition for self-actualization, right? OD stands for operational definition. How do you define someone who's self-actualized, right? Is it the number of hours they spend in meditation, right? Is it how many achievements they've got on their resume? How do you define it? How do you measure it? It's not something that we can measure. And as we know from our AS studies, right, if you can't measure something accurately, how do you scientifically test for it, right? Maslow's sample was rather small, and he mostly based his understanding based on biographies, right, which is not a very scientific methodology, right? While it can give you a lot of qualitative data, it's not very scientific or valid in that sense, right? Now, theories, on the other hand, still can be usefully applied, right? And applications can be, for example, to help organizations understand that they should meet the needs for their staff, right? If you want employees to perform better, you need to meet their needs. If you don't meet their needs, they can't perform, right? It kind of makes common sense to us, right? But sometimes you need to point this out to people. McClelland's theory, for example, helps you understand people better. And then if you understand people better, you can help them match their job roles a lot better. Right? So need for achievement, need for power, need for affiliation. If, for example, you're someone who has a need for affiliation, then what kind of job do you think you require? Something probably to do with people, like customer service, right? Dealing with customers, helping them out because you have a need for affiliation. You want relationships with people, right? If you had a need for power, then a more appropriate position would be something along the lines of being like a CEO, right, or a manager. Projective test, the test that we saw earlier, the picture of the two women, right? What are the strengths and weaknesses of such a test, right? The strengths could be that it allows people to share their opinions freely. A lot of rich qualitative data can be collected. But what do you think is the weakness? Is it standardized? Are people, answering the same thing all the time? Not necessarily, right? Is it a scientific measurement? Not really, right? It is qualitative, but it's not really quantitative. It's not scientific. It would be hard to repeat it with the same person and get the exact same results every single time because it's incredibly subjective, and that can be a weakness, right? Okay, moving on. Let's move on from needs theories. We covered Maslow, Adelphi, so let's just revise that. Maslow's was the hierarchy of needs, right? Several levels. Adelphi was a simplification of the hierarchy, right, using ERG, and McClelland was the need for power, affiliation, as well as what's the third one? Achievement, right? Yeah. Okay, now let's move on to cognitive theories, goal settings, expectancy, and empathy. Right? So cognitive theories, we talk about the goal setting theory. This opposes McClelland's idea, right? McClelland's idea, remember, was that all this motivation that happens is unconscious. You don't really know it until you have to do a test to find out that this is what you have, but it's unconscious. You're motivated unconsciously. But Locke in 1981 felt that goal setting is actually more of a key motivator, right? Cognitively, people think about what goals they need, and when they think about their goals, they work hard and they improve their performance, right? Locke and Latham, they later developed this more. They stated that having specific goals is better than having vague goals, right? Being specific, I'm going to lose 10 kilograms of weight by 3 months, right? That's a very specific goal rather than saying I'm just going to lose weight. That's very vague. Specific goals are oftentimes harder to achieve because they're very specific, right? And because they're harder to achieve, it actually makes you, in a sense, work harder as well, right? If it was just easier, like I'm going to eat a snack today, just eat a snack, right? So it's like there's no hard work and effort that's needed to achieve that, right? Goal setting theory comes with five principles, 4C1F. So when you set goals, you need goals which are clear. That's the word clarity, right? You need to be clear what your goals are. You need to have goals which are slightly challenging. They can't be too easy, right? I'm going to spend 4 hours on Instagram. That's not really a challenging goal. It's quite easy to do that, right? Complexity, right? They have some level. Are they difficult goals? Are they easy to understand? What's the level of complexity involved? Commitment, right? How committed are you? How much time can you commit to your goals? Feedback, right? How are you going to receive feedback on your performance, right? What measures are you going to do to ensure that you've achieved the goal, right? For example, I aim to score 100. I aim to score 100% for my mathematics exam. So my feedback would be the grade that I receive at the end of the exam, right? I know how much I scored, right? So feedback, here's an interesting example of feedback that I never forgot. When I was learning psychology in university, we learned about ergonomics and psychology and how design plays a very important role in human psychology. Look at this picture of a button on an elevator, right? This is the kind of button where you press the button and it lights up. So this is a sense of feedback, right? The button is giving me feedback like, hey, the light is up. That means you've pressed me, right? So that's feedback. It's very clear. And not only that, it's physical feedback and visual feedback. I can feel the button being pressed in and I can see the light coming up. I can feel it. This, on the other hand, is a type of elevator that comes with a touch screen. The problem with the touch screen is that although, yes, the color may change from blue to red, you don't feel the pressing of the button. And when it comes to humans and psychology, we like to feel that pressing of the button because it gives us a confirmed feeling. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. When you compare people pressing against a touchscreen, sometimes they'll press it, then they'll press it really hard to be sure that they clicked it, right? Because sometimes they're not sure, has it been clicked? Because it's a smooth surface, you can't feel whether it's been clicked, right? But with the actual button, if you press it, you've pressed it. You can feel it, right? So that's feedback. You need feedback when it comes to goals to know whether you're doing the right thing, right? So what are your goals? What are some of the goals you have in life? Think about your goals in life, right? Think about them for a minute. How do you set your goals? Are they vague? Are they specific? Are they clear? Are they complex? Do you have feedback, right? Let's set some goals together. So practice setting goals using the SMART goal method, right? So this is another method of setting goals. Earlier was the 4C1F method. This is the SMART goal method. It's a very popular method. SMART S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A stands for attainable. So specific means similar to the previous one on clarity. Is your goal specific? Are you clear about what you want to achieve, right? Is it measurable? Can you measure your goal? For example, if your goal is to lose weight, can you measure it, right? In kilograms, in grams. That's clearly measurable, right? Attainable. Is it something that is way out of your scope of knowledge, of ability, or is it something within your scope of being able to attain, right? Relevant, something that is meaningful to you, right? If you make a goal that's not relevant to you, why would you want to achieve it, right? Time scale, on what time frame are you going to achieve this goal? 1 month, 3 months, 1 year, right? So here are some examples. These are the examples, right? The 4CF, SMART goals. And there's one more, which is called the backwards goal setting, right? So backwards goal setting is like this. You work backwards from the end goal. Determine then the best way to reach that goal. For example, my goal is that I want to be financially free by 55 years of age. What do I need to do to reach this? So I go backwards. Okay, so if I want to reach financial freedom by age 55, by age 50, I need to have had saved this amount of money. By age 45, I need to have this amount, right? So and so on and so forth. Okay. Expectancy theory comes next. This is by Vroom, 1964. Expectancy theory believes that workers are rational beings, right? What does that mean? It means that they believe that workers can think, right? They think in a rational way. They think logically, right? And workers are making decisions every day between the cost and the reward of doing something, right? Workers' performance revolves around their knowledge, their skills, and their experience. The more knowledge they have, the better skills that they have, the more years of experience, that contributes to their performance, right? But at the same time, individual characteristics play a role, their personality, their ambitions, their goals, and so on and so forth, right? All workers are motivated regarding the relationship between the effort and performance and the performance being rewarded, right? So if you make an effort to work well in your job and you get rewarded, that's your motivation, right? If you make an effort and you're not rewarded, then you lose the motivation, right? So motivation is that relationship between your effort and your rewards, right? This can be represented like this, right? First, we start with effort, then performance, then reward. Effort is, for example, the employee believes that effort will result in acceptable performance, then it leads to their actual performance. They believe acceptable performance will produce the desired reward, and finally, if the reward is something that they value, the employee must value the reward. Another way of writing this is motivation, right? So we're looking at motivation. What is motivation? Motivation is expectancy times instrumentality times valence, right? So although these are different words, they refer to the concepts below here. Expectancy is the amount of effort you expect to put in. Instrumentality is the actual performance that you're doing. And valence is the reward that we're looking at, okay? For example, let's look at the first, this little comic strip, right? I should really step it up and come to work earlier, right? So that's the effort that's required. If I come to work earlier, I can get more work done than Jane. That will make me look good. So that's the work that you need to do, right? So you come to work earlier and get more work done. Finally, what is the reward, right? I'll definitely get that raise and beat Jane to the promotion at the end of the year, right? So that's the reward that you're getting for the work that you're doing based on the effort that you want to put in, and that is why you are motivated to do this, right? Okay. Now, let's look at another cognitive theory, right? This one is called equity theory. It's quite similar to expectancy theory, but slight differences, and we'll look at that. It was by Adams, based on the social exchange theory. People, again, weigh actions between the cost of doing something and the benefit of doing something. Quite similar to earlier, right? Equity theory applies this concept to the workplace primarily, right? The cost and benefits of being in a workplace, okay? Workers expect fairness. That's what people believe, right? I expect to be treated fairly at my workplace, okay? And if you pay, recognition, and status, this all contributes to whether or not I'm going to put in effort, right? Whether you pay me, whether you recognize my effort, whether you give me a high status. And when people compare themselves with others and they find there's an inequality, they then tend to feel very low motivation. For example, if you have been in a company for many years, right? Let's say you've been in this company for 10 years and you get paid $1,000 per week, right? And then somebody just joined the company last week and they're already getting $1,000, right? So that makes you feel very less motivated to work hard. Why? Because when you compared yourself with someone else, that person is earning just as much as you, but they didn't put in as much effort, right? Okay, so there's the input side and there's the output, and then it has to be in balance. Input is your skills, energy, enthusiasm, qualifications, right? So all the stuff that you have that you can put into the company, right? Now, input can be perceived and input can be actual, right? Perceived means this is how much you believe you're putting in, and actual means how much you're actually putting in, right? I'm sure you've met people who believe that they're working really hard, but in actual fact, they don't actually do much work, right? Then based on your input, how much output are you getting, right? Salary, benefits, recognition, and achievements. And does the output match the input, right? If you make effort to do work, do the rewards match your amount of effort? That's what we want to know, right? So output perceived can, again, perceived and actual is perceived is how much you believe you are receiving. Actual is how much you're actually receiving, right? So people can get paid a salary of $10,000 and still feel like I'm not getting paid enough, right? So there's a difference there. Okay. Now people can also compare, as we mentioned earlier. They sometimes compare themselves with others, and if the comparison is fair, well, then that's not a problem, right? If it's fair, then yeah, that's great. We're all working together. We all get the same amount of recognition and pay, right? But what if it's unfair? If the comparison is unfair, you may then have two scenarios: either underpayment or overpayment. Let's look at that. So underpayment, right, and overpayment. Underpayment is when someone else is paid more, but they have less experience. They don't do as much as you. They don't work as hard as you, and still you get paid less, right? So that's underpayment, right? What would you do, right? If someone is working the same job as you, but they get paid more and you get paid less, in spite of the fact that you have more skills and experience, what would you do? Would you complain? Would you demand HR to raise your salary? I would, right? What about overpayment? You should be rewarded more versus you are rewarded more versus your comparison, right? So let's say you compare yourself with someone, you just came into the company, but you're earning $2,000. Someone else who's been there for 10 years, only earning $1,000. What would you do? Right? If someone else is earning less than you, would you go and complain and say, hey, I think you should sacrifice some of my income to pay for that person? Right? It's an interesting question to ask yourself. Okay, evaluation, cognitive, how individuals perceive the situation, has to do with their thoughts. Right? Theories are usefully applied to the workplace. For example, it is crucial for managers to understand goals, right? How to set goals for your team so that people can achieve them. Expectancy theory is to get workers involved, right? So, for example, the expectancy theory is understanding that workers are rational, they know the cost and the benefits. So, why don't you invite your workers to come together when setting goals so that you can get their input? Right? Equity theory is how people make sense in companies, right? Is it fair? Is it unfair? So on and so forth. Martin and Peterson did a study on retail workers, and what they found was interesting. They found that people who just join a company and they get what's the word for it? To actually check my slides. I know I wrote it down somewhere. All right, so new workers were paid less. They felt inequity, but existing workers did not perceive inequity, overpayment, because they were not comparing themselves to new workers. Right, so when new workers had joined in, new workers will obviously compare themselves to others, and when they compare themselves to others, they may feel a sense of inferiority, right, or unfairness because they get paid less. But older people who have been working in the company for a longer period of time, they don't bother comparing, right? So they don't feel a problem, right? They're earning what they believe they should be earning based on their experience. Now, some real-life studies have been conducted to do with need theories, right? So there is ecological validity because, like for example, the Martin and Peterson study was done with actual people in jobs, right? But it has low generalizability because oftentimes these studies are just done in one company in one place. All right, let's move on. So we've covered need theories, we've covered cognitive theories, right? Now we're looking at motivators at work, right? Intrinsic, extrinsic, and rewards, right? People work for money, but they work harder for meaning, right? Do you agree with this quote? What do you think? If someone paid you less, right, but gave you a meaningful job, would you work at it, right? So extrinsic is anything that's external, intrinsic is internal. So these are to do with consequences of your behavior. If you do something that's good, you get good consequences. If you do something bad, you get bad consequences. Intrinsic and internal is more towards your internal performance, how you feel about it internally, right? So extrinsic rewards have to do with things like money, promotion, businesses. They come from outside of you. Intrinsic rewards are to do with things like enjoyment, satisfaction, meaningfulness. These are things that you feel inside of yourself, right? Okay, so oftentimes people with extrinsic motivation tend to work in high-paying jobs in, for example, corporate institutions, banking industry, and so on. Whereas people who have intrinsic motivation, they find a lot of meaningfulness in their job. They tend to work at places like hospitals, right, which may not pay as highly as corporate jobs, but for them the job is more meaningful and they don't need so much money, right? Do you have a job yet? If yes, why? Think about that for a moment. How many of you here watching this video have a job? Right? If you don't feel ashamed. I haven't had a job for months, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, I lost my main job. That's why I do YouTube just for fun. And why do you have this job? Why do I maintain my YouTube channel even though nobody pays me much money? Why do I do it? Well, I do it because I love to help people. So for me, this is a meaningful job, right? And because it's meaningful, even if I don't get paid, I still find meaning in it. Now let's look at reward systems, right? How does an organization reward you, right? Pay, for example, should be linked to performance. If you perform well, you deserve to get paid more, right? For example, someone who works hard finishes his or her work earlier. But oftentimes, I don't know whether you get this around the rest of the world, but in our Malaysian country, people tend to want to procrastinate. Sometimes we're well known for the wrong things like being lazy and we don't want to work harder, but we want to earn more, right? We want to earn all the big bucks, but we don't want to work hard, right? So that can be a bit of a irony. For example, someone who works well for the whole year, right? What would you do if you had a staff in your company that worked well for 1 year? What kind of prize would you give them? What kind of reward? So some companies, for example, I used to MC company dinners, they'll give a long service award. If you've been in the company for more than 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you get a special award. Okay? Some companies practice profit sharing, where company profit is shared, right? And this creates a sense of belonging to the company, right? If a company closes down their public trading, it says, hey guys, hey everybody in the world, those of you who own this, let's say you buy a stock market stock. If you own the company, part of the company shares profits with you, right? So it gives you a sense of belonging in the company. It gives you more motivation because you're part of the company, you're not just a staff, right? Can all companies do this? Well, some do, some don't. It's a bit difficult, right, to implement logistically to track everybody's profit sharing, but it can be done. Okay, this is a meme, right? Manager says we're more than just a team, we're a family. Staff just roll their eyes, right? Because we know that it's not as true as we would like it to be. Oftentimes, people act like their office is a family when actually it's a lot of people ready to backstab you. Okay, so reward systems continue. This is by DeWall and Jens. So DeWall and Jens did, I believe, a literature review of all the studies on this chapter and this topic. Right? So they found studies that supported the idea, and they also found studies against the idea. The studies that supported the idea, for example, was by Yan, 1997, said that Chinese state industry growth happened because of bonuses, right? So extrinsic reward. Belfield and Martson, right? They said that performance related to pay was always very positive, right? Always positive. Well, not always, but for most of the time. Thirdly, Hollowell in 2005 found that performance-related pay scales seen as this equals a strong stock market presence. Okay, so basically is in other words, the stronger or the more money in when they pay more money to the executives, they do better in the stock market. The stock market presence increases when they do better than when they get paid higher, right? But they also do lack support, right? Because organizations have high inequalities and no staff turnover in some cases, right? So they're not very fair places sometimes. Excuse me, let me rephrase that point. Organizations with a high level of inequality tend to also have a high staff turnover. Bloom 1999 said, but baseball teams have high inequalities will lose more. Right? So if a baseball team comprising of 10, 20 people and there's a lot of inequalities there, they will lose more, right? Regarding pay and so on and so forth. Faturuso and Dafuse and Kabir, they said there's no relationship between the size of a person's bonus and their performance. But what do you think? Do you think if you pay people more money that they're more likely to improve? It's hard to say, it depends. Right? What about non-monetary rewards? Can you think right now of a non-monetary reward system? What can you think of? Right? Show an example. McDonald's put a post out on their Facebook saying employee of the month. Right? They didn't have to pay anybody to put this out. It was completely free. That's why it's one of the free analysis tools. Okay. Free analysis. Not free analysis. Got tongue twisted. It is one of the free available options to help you understand the market better, right? But here's the problem I have with these kind of things. As you can see here, it says by McDonald's, we're proud of you, Rory. Congratulations. No likes, no comments, no shares. So that's quite sad, right? It was uploaded in 2017. Not even Rory's own family liked the picture, right? So that's rather unfortunate, right? So it shows that sometimes things don't, even though it is a non-monetary reward, it may not necessarily feel rewarding to the person receiving it, right? So what's the difference between a reward and a recognition? A reward is when the organization rewards are clear from the start, right? The organization tells you, okay, this is what you need to follow, right? It also refers to your salary per month, right? Recognition, on the other hand, is that you are no longer allowed to publish this elsewhere, right? So for example, a Medal of Honor is something given to a very, very, very honorable veteran, fights for the country, right? And the thing about recognition is that you give a person a medal to recognize the efforts that they made. But would you give cash or a medal for every single heroic deed that you come across? Sometimes you don't have to do that, right? If you get a cat out of a tree, do you deserve a medal? Seems a bit spoiled to me, right? So at the same time, you don't want to pay people or give them medals every time they do something nice, right? Then they're just learning to do something nice for the reward, right? Doing so would cheapen the act, according to Hansen, right? If you keep giving, you would cheapen the act of recognition. Which AS studies involve reinforcement? Who can remember? Reinforcement is also known as what kind of learning, right? So the Bobodol study, right, is where we first encountered this level of reinforcements and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired when I'm recording this, so my words may go all over the place, all over off topic. So if you find my words have gone off topic, it's because I am in a waking dream. Anyway, let's move on. Reinforcements. Okay, we're done with that. So praise. What are some non-monetary rewards that you can use to reinforce behaviors in people? You can praise them. Hey, well done, good job. Right, makes me feel good. Right, you can also write a formal letter of thanks, which is very rare. But you can write a letter, saying that congratulations on this. I believe you did an excellent job. This is why I'm giving you a pay raise or whatever. Right? Or informally, you can just pass by someone's desk and say, hey, good job last week. By the way. Right? Achievement is empowering. Right? The sense of achievement is very empowering. I've achieved something. I feel good about it. Okay. This also has to do with solving a problem, meeting a particular goal, and then you feel your need for achievement fulfilled. Right? It does create motivation, right? Solving problems, working together with people and others and so on and so forth. It does create motivation, but it also, in addition to that, it also allows people a sense of belonging, right? When they achieve for a company. What else? Rose in 1998 said 75% of UK organizations chose non-monetary reward schemes. Right? So people obviously are showing that they prefer non-monetary rewards as well. How do they do this? What are the positive benefits of doing non-monetary rewards? You highlight all the desirable behaviors in the company, and you can then create role models, right? So if I give you this non-monetary reward, you then can usually become a role model for others, right, to follow along. Recognition is something that's given immediately, and it should be given immediately to strengthen the relationship. Right, schemes are usually the low cost, right? So reward schemes that use non-monetary methods are never cold loss. They can fight in the dark, or rather, they can get recognized, which is very, very affordable. Let me rephrase that: they can get recognized and it's practically free, right? To get your employee of the month picture on McDonald's, you just have to be the employee of the month. You don't have to actually do anything. Right? Job satisfaction scales measure things like this, and they found that when they administered a job satisfaction scale to the public chose recognition as the first most important characteristic, and salary was only the sixth most important. Brown and Armstrong, they said that factors that make workers stay and increase satisfaction is things like having a positive, effective relationship between workers and managers, right? So they believe that if you have a positive relationship with your boss, you're more likely to be motivated to do work. Right? What else do we have? Workers know, and if workers know that if workers expect to get appreciated. Right? All workers know that if you appreciate them, things are going to go well, and you will increase your satisfaction. Okay? Workers' efforts should be valued. Right? You should value what each and every person contributes. Okay, let's evaluate. So motivation in this chapter is more in a practical sense rather than a theoretical sense, right? From capturing, motivation here has to do it more with actual doing stuff rather than just learning, right? What factors act as motivators? So you've learned about some of the factors that all people that we love, right? And it can be difficult. All people that we love and we're motivated to work, to support them, for example, right? What are the other factors that we looked at, right? Need for this, need for that, and so on and so forth, right? It's useful for yourself to decide what kind of job to aim for, right? So if you do personality tests that has to do with work-related characteristics and you understand your usual self better, you can then decide what job is best suited for your personality. Like for me, I have a need for affiliation as well as need for, I love teaching and helping educate people, so I think teaching is a good job for me. It's also useful for managers to find out what motivates their staff, right? So managers want to know what motivates our staff, what makes them more motivated to work, and if they can identify it, then they're more likely to get them to work more and earn more money, right? Behaviorist approach has to do with reinforcements on behavior. When you give people good rewards based on their behavior, you call that a reinforcement. Individual versus situational, what do you think, right? Are people motivated individually, or is it something, the situation, that changes the way they are? I mean, it's hard to say for sure entirely, but for now I'm just going to put individual. Generally speaking, it is individual, but you can actually argue for it to be situational, especially if you forgot that the eyeball is still there. Okay. individuals, different people, different motivators. Yeah. So each individual is different. My motivations are different from your motivations, are different from her motivations, and so on and so forth. Alright, situational, you could perhaps apply it this way by creating an environment of praisefulness, right, versus a business environment which is more focused on money, right? So that could be the situation. The situation could be that, okay guys, we agree that our company policy is that people who come in for the first time must wash and clean the whole pot, right? Okay, if you do it, so that could be the individual part, right, and also part of the bottom, or rather the remainder, right? Okay, so once again, that's the 3 sub-chapters with all their bullet points. Please make sure you revise and slowly go through it. Don't go through it all at once. That would not be advisable. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you soon.